My girlfriend of 10 years got pregnant by my younger brother weeks before our marriage and ditched me to marry him. Now, 6 years later, something terrible has happened, and my estranged family asks a favor of me. I, 32M, have been living separated from my family for the past 6 years due to a major incident that tore our family apart. I'll try to explain the whole situation as clearly as possible. 6 years ago, I was engaged to my high school sweetheart, Rebecca, who is also 32 now. We had been together since we were 16 and were finally getting married at 26. Everything seemed perfect, and I was excited to start our life together. I met Rebecca when we were both 16 in our high school biology class. We were lab partners, and I was immediately drawn to her intelligence and sense of humor. For our first date, I saved up my allowance for weeks to take her to a nice restaurant in town. I was so nervous that I accidentally knocked over my water glass, but Rebecca just laughed and helped me clean it up. That's when I knew she was special. Throughout high school, I tried to make every moment with Rebecca memorable. For her 17th birthday, I surprised her with a scavenger hunt around town, leaving clues at all our favorite spots. The final clue led her to our local park, where I had set up a picnic with all her favorite foods. I'll never forget how her eyes lit up when she saw it. When we went to different colleges, I was determined to make our long-distance relationship work. Every weekend, I'd make the 3-hour drive to visit her, no matter how much schoolwork I had. I'd bring her care packages during exam weeks, filled with her favorite snacks, stress relief items, and handwritten notes of encouragement. After college, when we both moved back to our hometown, I worked extra shifts at my job to save up for a dream vacation for us. I surprised Rebecca with a 2-week trip to Europe, something she'd always wanted to do. We visited Paris, Rome, and London. In Paris, I arranged a private boat tour on the Seine River at sunset. I can still picture how beautiful she looked with the Eiffel Tower glittering behind her. When Rebecca mentioned she wanted to go back to school for her master's degree, I supported her completely. I took on a second job to help with her tuition and living expenses. I'd stay up late with her, quizzing her for exams and proofreading her papers, even when I had to be up early for work the next day. For our 10th anniversary, I planned a recreation of our first date. I reserved the same table at the same restaurant, wore a similar outfit, and even arranged with the waiter to accidentally spill my water. Rebecca laughed so hard, saying it was perfect. After dinner, I took her to the beach, where we had our first kiss, and proposed under the stars. Looking back now, it's painful to think about all these memories. I put my heart and soul into our relationship, truly believing we were building a life together. It makes the betrayal sting even more, knowing how much I loved her and how easily she seemed to throw it all away. A few days before our wedding, Rebecca came to me with shocking news. She told me she was pregnant, but the baby wasn't mine. She had been cheating on me with my younger brother William for a long time. She had done the math and was certain the baby was his. I was devastated and furious. But what hurt even more was when Rebecca told me she had developed feelings for William and wanted to marry him instead of me. It felt like my whole world was crumbling around me. In my anger and pain, I went to my parents and told them everything. I expected them to be as shocked and upset as I was, but to my surprise, they seemed oddly calm about the whole situation. My parents had always treated William as their golden child, but I never expected this level of betrayal. They told me I should be happy for my brother. My mother was even excited about becoming a grandmother, completely disregarding how I might feel about the situation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like my entire family had turned against me in an instant. The people who were supposed to love me and support me were telling me to just accept this massive betrayal and act like everything was fine. Unable to cope with the betrayal from not just Rebecca and William, but my parents as well, I made the difficult decision to leave. I packed my bags, moved to a different city, and cut off contact with all of them. That was 6 years ago. In all that time, my father called me a few times, but those conversations were always strained and uncomfortable. My mother, William, and Rebecca never reached out to me at all. I didn't even know the name of William's child, my own nephew. I tried to move on with my life as best I could. I focused on my career, made new friends, and even started dating again, though I found it hard to trust after what happened with Rebecca. Still, I was slowly building a new life for myself, away from the pain and betrayal of my past. Then a few days ago, I got a call out of the blue from my mother. I was surprised to see her name on my phone screen after all this time. When I answered, she sounded upset and told me that William had been in a terrible accident. He was now paralyzed and unable to work or take care of his family. I felt a mix of emotions hearing this news. Part of me was shocked and saddened to hear about William's accident. Despite everything that happened, he was still my brother. But another part of me couldn't help but feel angry that after 6 years of no contact, this was the reason my mother was finally reaching out to me. What she said next made me even angrier. She told me that the family needed my help. Specifically, she wanted me to come back and step in as a father figure for William's child and help Rebecca take care of the family while William recovered. I was furious. After everything that had happened, how could she possibly think this was an appropriate request? I told her absolutely not. I reminded her that Rebecca and William had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and that she and my father had chosen to support them over me. I said I had no obligation to help them now, especially after years of no contact. My mother got upset and accused me of being selfish. She said family should always come first, and that I needed to let go of the past. She tried to guilt me by saying William's child needed a father figure, and that Rebecca was struggling to manage everything on her own. I stood my ground and refused again. I told her that William and Rebecca made their choice 6 years ago, and now they had to live with the consequences. I said it wasn't my responsibility to step in and play happy families, just because things had gotten difficult for them. Before hanging up, I told my mother not to contact me again unless it was to apologize for how they had treated me 6 years ago. I said I might be willing to have a relationship with them again if they acknowledged how much they had hurt me, but I would never step in as a replacement for William or a father figure for his child. After the call ended, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty for turning my back on my family when they needed help, but a larger part of me felt angry and hurt all over again. The wound that had started to heal was now ripped open, and all the pain and betrayal came flooding back. I've been struggling with this decision ever since the call. On one hand, I know that William's accident is not his child's fault, and I feel bad for the kid growing up without a fully present father. On the other hand, I don't think it's fair for my family to expect me to swoop in and fix everything after they betrayed me and then ignored me for years. Some of my friends think I'm justified in my decision. They say my family made their bed and now they have to lie in it, but others think I'm being too harsh and that I should at least consider helping for the sake of the child. I'm torn about what to do. Part of me wants to maintain the life I've built for myself, free from the drama and pain of my past. But another part wonders if I'm being too stubborn and if there's a way I could help without completely sacrificing my own well-being. So, Reddit, am I correct in refusing to help my brother and his family after he stole my fiancée and got her pregnant? Edit. Wow. Thank you all for your responses and perspectives. I want to address a few common points and provide some additional context. To those asking about my dating life. Yes, I've dated since Rebecca, but I haven't had any serious long-term relationships. The betrayal definitely affected my ability to trust, and I've been working on that in therapy. Many have asked if I'm sure the child is William's. Honestly, I don't know for certain. At the time, Rebecca said she was sure based on the timing, but I never saw any proof. Either way, she chose to leave me for William, so the paternity doesn't change much for me personally. To those saying I should at least visit William in the hospital, I'm considering this. While I'm not ready to forgive him, I do want to know more about his condition and prognosis. A few comments mentioned the possibility of financial help without direct involvement. This is something I hadn't considered before and might be worth exploring. For those curious about my father's calls over the years, they were mostly surface-level conversations. He never apologized or acknowledged the hurt caused, which is why the relationship remained strained. Some asked about other family members. I have a few cousins I'm still in touch with, but they live in different states and weren't closely involved in the situation. A common sentiment is that I don't owe them anything, but helping might bring me peace. I appreciate this perspective and will give it some thought. Thank you all again for your input. This situation is complex and emotionally charged, and reading your comments has given me a lot to think about. I'll update if there are any significant developments. Update. It's been a few weeks since my last post, and a lot has happened. I wanted to give you all an update on my situation. After my initial refusal to help, my parents didn't give up. My mother called me almost every day, and even my father started reaching out more frequently. They kept pushing me to reconsider my decision, telling me how much William and his family needed my help. At first, I ignored most of their calls and messages, but after weeks of constant contact, I started to feel worn down. A small part of me was curious about William's condition, even though I was still angry about everything that had happened. Finally, after about 3 weeks of this, I decided to visit William in the hospital. I told myself it was just to see how bad his condition really was, not because I was considering helping. When I arrived at the hospital, my stomach was in knots. I hadn't seen any of my family members in person for 6 years, and I wasn't sure how I would react. As I walked into William's room, I saw him lying in the hospital bed. He looked pale and thin, hooked up to various machines. It was a shock to see my once active younger brother in this state. My parents were there too. They looked older than I remembered, with more gray hair and wrinkles. When they saw me, they rushed over to hug me, but I stepped back. I wasn't ready for that level of intimacy yet. Then I saw her, Rebecca. She was standing by William's bedside, looking tired and worried. When our eyes met, a flood of memories hit me. I remembered all the times I had trusted her completely, all the plans we had made for our future together. I thought about how she had been my best friend, my confidant, the person I thought I would spend my life with, and then I remembered how easily she had thrown all of that away, how she had betrayed me in the worst possible way with my own brother. Seeing Rebecca again after all these years brought back all the pain and anger I had worked so hard to move past. I had to resist the urge to turn around and walk right out of the hospital. I didn't speak to Rebecca. Instead, I asked my father about William's condition. He explained that William had been in a car accident and had suffered a spinal cord injury. He was paralyzed from the waist down and would need extensive rehabilitation. The doctors weren't sure if he would ever walk again. As we were talking, my father mentioned something that caught me off guard. He said that they had done a paternity test soon after the child was born, confirming that William was indeed the father. I hadn't known about this test, and it felt like a final confirmation of their betrayal. While we were talking, a young boy of about 5 or 6 came into the room. I realized this must be William and Rebecca's son, my nephew. The boy looked confused and a bit scared by all the hospital equipment. Rebecca introduced him to me as his uncle. I spent a few minutes with the boy, mostly just saying hello and asking him about his favorite toys and games. It was strange to meet this child who was, biologically, my nephew, but who I had never known existed until recently. After the hospital visit, my mother insisted that I come to their house to talk more. I reluctantly agreed, mostly because I wanted to get this whole situation over with. At the house, my mother launched into a speech about family responsibility and how I needed to step up and help Rebecca and the child while William was recovering. She talked about how overwhelmed Rebecca was, trying to care for William, raise a child, and manage their household on her own. As I listened to her, I felt my anger rising. When she finally paused, I told her exactly how I felt. I said she was being selfish and only thinking about William, just like she always had. I pointed out that in all her calls and during this whole conversation, she hadn't once asked how I was doing or shown any interest in my life over the past 6 years. I told her that it seemed like the only reason she had reached out to me was because she needed something from me, not because she actually cared about rebuilding our relationship. I said it hurt that she seemed more concerned about William's well-being than she ever had been about mine, even after he had betrayed me so badly. My mother tried to defend herself, saying that of course she cared about me, but that William's situation was an emergency. She said that as the healthy brother, I had a responsibility to help. I took a deep breath and told her my final decision. I said that while I felt sympathy for William's condition and for the challenges his family was facing, I couldn't give up my own life and peace of mind to help them. I explained that I had spent years building a new life for myself, working through the pain and betrayal they had caused me, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice all of that progress. I told her that I might be willing to have a relationship with them again in the future, but only if they were willing to acknowledge how much they had hurt me and work on rebuilding trust. I made it clear that this relationship would not involve me acting as a replacement for William or a father figure for his child. My parents were upset with my decision. They called me selfish and said I was abandoning my family when they needed me most. But I stood firm. I told them that they had made their choice 6 years ago when they supported William and Rebecca over me, and now they had to live with the consequences of that decision. Before I left, I told them that I was open to staying in touch and possibly working on our relationship over time, but only if they could respect my boundaries and show genuine interest in my life, not just what I could do for them. As I drove home that evening, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty for not helping more, especially when I thought about William's son growing up with a disabled father. But a larger part of me felt relieved. I had finally stood up for myself and set clear boundaries with my family. I realized that while blood relation is important, it doesn't give anyone the right to mistreat you or take advantage of you. I had spent years healing from their betrayal, and I wasn't willing to reopen those wounds just because they suddenly decided they needed me. In the weeks since that visit, my parents have called a few times. The conversations have been tense, but they seem to be making an effort to ask about my life and not just talk about William. It's a small step, but it gives me hope that maybe, over time, we can build a healthier relationship. For now, I'm focusing on my own life and well-being. I've started seeing a therapist again to work through the emotions brought up by reconnecting with my family. I'm also throwing myself into my work and spending time with friends who have supported me through all of this. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my family, but I feel confident that I made the right decision for myself. I'm open to slowly rebuilding connections, but only on my terms and at a pace I'm comfortable with. Thank you all for your support and advice throughout this difficult situation. It's been a challenging few weeks, but I feel like I've finally found some closure and am ready to move forward with my life.